Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unmuted Love. I'm C. Eshelman, and I am your host here on this podcast where nothing is off limits, as you know, to talk about. Today, I'm very delighted to have Sheryl Ang here. She's a best-selling co-author, therapeutic coach, and founder of Self-Directed Life. I like that she's the founder of Self-Directed Life. I want to do that too. I want to have that title. A former chartered financial analyst and C-suite leader turned homeschooling mom of 3. Sheryl now guides parents, educators, and women to break generational cycles and lead from inner safety, right? That's what we're all hoping for. Her cycle breaker coaching integrates somatic therapy, trauma-informed care, and women-centered tools to support deep healing in areas such as conscious parenting, inner child work, and complex trauma. Through one-on-one sessions, group experiences, and community-led learning, Sheryl helps clients shift from survival mode to grounded leadership, whether at home, in relationship, or in life. So I'm read that to you, which I ordinarily don't do, but she has such a diverse background that I wanted to make sure I got it all in there. So welcome, Sheryl. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Unmuted Love.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So where am I talking to you at right now? Where are you?
I'm currently based in Singapore, so that's where my home base is. But we have been really traveling around the world a lot in the last year or so. I would say this year we've been to maybe like 5-6 countries already.
That's great. So one of the things that's intriguing about you is that you are a homeschooler, and you said that you are traveling a lot. And I'm like, well, what are you traveling a lot doing? And you're like, well, I'm a homeschooler. And I'm like, wait, homeschooling doesn't usually mean traveling, but it does for you. So I think that's a very interesting topic for my listeners, because a lot of listeners have children who do not fit very well into a public school or even a private school setting. And so a lot of parents are staying home and doing homeschooling and unschooling for some people. So I would love to hear your take on unschooling and a little bit about your kids and what you do when you do this traveling, because I think that I'm curious, and I think my listeners will be too.
My kids are 10, 9, and 6, still kind of in the trenches, I would say. But we really see ourselves as part of the unschooling movement. I call them as doing life schooling, because homeschooling doesn't really quite reflect what we are doing. What we are really doing is embracing life, right? And we do a lot of traveling primarily because of my husband's work. And also because we feel that the best way to learn is to get experiences. And what better way to learn about Pompeii when you go to Rome? So it's really important for us to match all of these historical places or history that we are learning to all these places that we are going. When we are going into different places, we also get to see or live their culture and understand a little bit more about the place. And that's what we really love about homeschooling this way. I guess we're also called as worldschoolers, is a part of a movement where children go overseas to learn. And we really see ourselves as learning on the go and using the world as our classroom. Now, I do understand that, how do we actually maintain a homeschooling environment where we are schooling? And that's the beauty of the movement of unschooling, where we can really learn with whatever materials that we have at this point in time. So, for example, one of our big stays with in whatever country that we go is the museums, right? This is like a staple that you could go to a museum, a library. These are the things that every country would have, and that would be what we would go to whenever we go to a new place. And this is where we also learn a lot of things about what's happening. There's so many museums all over the world, science, history, and all of different subjects that we can cover. So that's one way that we use experience to be able to learn. Because we are on the go, the amount of things that we can carry is not a lot, although I still do carry quite a lot of stuff. But in terms of like the books, the storybooks, the things that we learn as we go along, we now use the laptop. And so we use a lot of online softwares, and these has really been helpful, and we probably wouldn't be able to do if we're not living in the 21st century.
Right, probably. Well, you could, but it would just be somewhat limited. So how did you get into this? What made you decide that this was what you wanted to do for your children?
I guess we had some role models. We had friends who were homeschooled, and we realized that this was a possibility. And when we got into the Singapore homeschooling community, we realized that it's actually a small but thriving and very close-knit community. So there were a lot of co-ops, there were a lot of things that we could plug ourselves into, and that really helped me to get inducted into the community. But I think along the way, I've realized that the way that I want to homeschool, it might be different from a lot of other homeschoolers, because we want to be self-directed, as my brand is Self-Directed Life. So I have to be, as a parent, to be self-directed, to understand what I am looking for, so that I can be a leader to my child and have them be self-directed in their education. So that's really how we started. So I began to research on the different, philosophies of school pedagogies, and then I landed in this philosophy called Reggio Emilia. And if you are familiar with this pedagogy, it is really for preschoolers based in Italy, where Reggio Emilia started. And it is really learning that children can express and communicate in hundreds of languages through expressions, through movement, through behavior, and things like that. And that really intrigued me, and also allowed me to learn how to really be attuned to the child's inner world. And as my kids grew up, I realized that that's where I really want to maintain or base that. So we really still follow our child's interests, and like any 10-year-old tween age child, they are interested in Minecraft, in Harry Potter. And we use this as starting points for us to be able to dive in deeper in our learning. Yeah, so that's how we really started with homeschooling.
It's so, when I hear you talk about it, my mind is like leaving the square box that it's in, and it's expanding like this, outward, because I'm like, wow, okay, so much is possible, right? When you step out of you have to go to school 6-7 hours a day, every day, most of the year for the, first 13 years of your life, or however long. I don't know how long you go to school in Singapore, but in America, you go to school for 13 years straight. And then you leave there. If you are inclined, you'll go on to college, right? For 4, 5, 6 more years. I mean, it's just like school forever. And it's very boring, in my opinion. And so a lot of times our kids, sorry, teachers, I don't mean that you're boring. It's just a little boring for kids, just the routine of it. And I know that our kids who have complex trauma need routine. So switching up and running around isn't always the best for them. They need structure and routine, but also they need novelty, right? They need to be engaged, and they need to have their mind grabbed and creatively stimulated in a way that keeps them learning over time. And I just love hearing what you're saying about, yeah, let's travel and let's go places, and let's not worry about this sort of regimented way of learning. I really love the idea of it. I never really even thought it was possible actually to do that when I was raising my kids, but that was a long time ago. And homeschooling, it was a thing, but it wasn't quite as big as it is nowadays.
Yeah, I would like to pick on the point when you talk about routine, because, it seems like as unschoolers or self-directors, we don't have routines. And I would say that that's completely not true. Kids do need routine, especially like you say, kids who have gone through trauma. I have undiagnosed neurodivergent children, and they definitely thrive in routines, in familiarity. You would imagine that when we are traveling, there wouldn't be a lot of routines, because things are kind of like, moving, there are lots of moving parts, right? But we do try to build routines around whatever structure that we can. So when we think about routines, we don't think about schedules. So we think about the activities or sequences that move like before a certain activity and after a certain activity. And that's how I define as routines. When we are traveling, we still maintain the same kind of wake time routine. We still wake up around the same time. We still sleep around the same time. We try not to deviate from a lot of that. I do know that we have to get, past jet lag and all of these things. But after we do try to settle into our usual routine, whichever country we are based in. Again, our routines are not linked to specific times or activities, but a set of categories. So for example, we talked about having museums and libraries as our structures whenever we go. And that's kind of the same thing, in our week, we would spend maybe 2 or 3 days outdoors. We would still go to the nearest playgrounds for movement and exercise, because children really need a lot of that for regulation. And then we would also go to do like museums and libraries, which are what we usually do when we're back at home, right? So these kind of familiarity to know that, okay, we're going to learn it in the museum today. We're going to the library to pick up books that we like. And so it's really establishing these sort of categories so that they can find the kind of routines of things that are familiar to them even when they are away from home.
Yeah, that sounds great. Because I was like, I don't know how that would work, but I'm sure it would if you got used to it. I can't even wrap my brain around it at all. I'm thinking about, okay, 6 countries. That's a country every 2 months, yeah?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, thereabouts.
So where have you been this year? I'm just curious and excited for you. I want to be you for a second.
So we've been to China. So we are bilingual. So China is a great way for us to be really immersed in the language. Singapore, our official working language is English. So most of us speak English at home and in schools and in our business. If you're Chinese, which I am, then you speak a second language, which is your mother tongue, and it's Mandarin for us. In general, our grasp of the language is not as fluent as if we were in China. So we go for immersion in China. And so we spent 3 weeks there. We were really learning about the history of China, and that's where our ancestors come from. So we really understanding our roots here and speaking and learning from people and really immersing in that language. And my kids are really into World War II. And so we got a chance to visit our friend who's based in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City. And that was where we really learned about the effects of the war and understanding how people fought in a guerrilla warfare in the jungle, which is a very different way of doing war in the past, right? Which was more like air and land and things like that. And so that is a way for us to learn about history in this way. This year, we spent quite a lot of time in the UK, primarily in London. We have friends in London, so we like to visit our friends, and we have homeschooler friends in London too. And so we'll meet up with them. That's also a way where we create familiarity, where we, go to bases or places where we know people and we continue our friendship as if it was yesterday that we saw them. So having that sense of familiarity with friends is also really important. Again, we spend a lot of time in the museums learning about World War II because my kids are so into the wars, and as boys, I have 3 boys, and they love about fighting and guns and all of these things. And so it's an opportunity for us to learn about World War I and World War II. We also go to Amsterdam this year. And so it was really nice to, again, extend on this idea of the World War II. We went to the Anne Frank Museum and really see how this little girl, just not much older than them, have to go through in her lifetime, have to go into hiding and things like that. So it's just really having them to explore the different perspectives and different types of lives that a person would go through. So these are just some of the places that we have been to.
That's so fun. That's such a great way of learning, really touching it, right? Real life, living, seeing it, what it was really like, touching it, feeling it, being part of it. That's awesome. It makes me wonder, what are the drawbacks? What are the things that you were like, oh, okay, this doesn't work, but we're going to keep doing it because we're traveling. Have you noticed there are some drawbacks to being a traveling unschooler?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Even though we do want to try to have structures and routines, again, it depends on the child. Sometimes it can be too much. This happens especially when we are traveling on short journeys, right? So when I talk about establishing routines and familiarity, often it has to have a certain time to play out, right? You can't do that in like a week and try to squeeze in like every single attraction in a week. That's not going to be possible. So if we were to talk about slow traveling, to be able to travel just at the speed as you would when you're living in your home country, then you'll find a lot more space to be able to do that. So unfortunately, in this travel, we did have a few more travel. So even in the UK, where we were staying there for 2.5 months, we did travel in and out of London as our base a lot more. So we went to Bath, we went to Cambridge, we went to Birmingham, and just a lot of nearby cities. And you can see that it can get a little bit too much for the child, and then that would come out in dysregulation, in aggression, in tiredness. And so we really have to be attuned with our kids to realize that, oh, when it's too much, because they are not going to be able to, not necessarily be able to tell you that this is too much for them. So we have to really be aware of these signs to really understand that this is, or maybe a little bit too much traveling in between, even though we are based in a specific country. You will also find that this is when things fall apart, like your boundaries fall apart, the amount of resistance go up, where they'll tell you, no, I don't want to do this, and then you will get frustrated because obviously you come to a new place, you want to be out exploring, you want to do stuff together with them. And so your family dynamics would change slightly.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, of course, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that you have built a course around setting boundaries. And I'm like, well, I'm intrigued by that because, as you know, the listeners here have largely children who've experienced complex developmental trauma, and they don't love our boundaries. As a matter of fact, they sort of see boundaries as something to push against. And yet I often say, consequences don't really work very well with children who have complex trauma because it activates their survival brains. And so I suggest people use boundaries instead. And then I think we don't have a lot of education on what is boundary. How do you set a boundary? What if they don't do it? Well, yeah, what if they don't do it? You set a boundary, you set a limit, and then you set a boundary, but the kids just are like, yeah, I don't care. So I'm curious to know just what you have to say about that and how you might be helpful to folks who are experiencing that.
Yeah, thank you, C. It's really true that kids who have gone through trauma and who've gone developmentally complex, it is really hard, to be able to stick to the boundaries. But let's just even step one step back and think about how we are as adults. If your boss were to tell you to go do this stuff, is that gonna make you feel good? Like you don't like it too, right? So we need to come with this empathic lens that it is hard, even between adults. And it is even harder for a child who's much smaller with less authority and has to be always listening to a child. And this is why, again, being self-directed is really, really important, and to help your child build that sense of self-directedness and to trust your child that he knows or she knows that this is good for them, even though that's not what we really want, right? I do like you make a very big differentiating factor between boundaries and limits. And I think boundaries are sort of like the values that we want. If you think about in a big picture, right? It is like this tree that we have, and we are really nurturing that tree. What do we need for this tree to make this tree blossom and grow? And it's really rooted in our values. And limits are kind of like the things that we say, okay, how do we get these values in place? And then we put in numbers, we put in time limits, and maybe sometimes even arbitrary numbers to say, okay, this is what we're gonna do, just because the adults say so. So I think the first thing we need to do as parents, whenever we face the pushback from our kids, is to really look within ourselves and ask ourselves, do we really need this boundary? Is this boundary really necessary? Sometimes we as parents, granted, we are very overwhelmed all the time because we have to make this household work. We might even have to work, and we are managing multiple kids. They just only have to deal with themselves, which is one, right? It is a lot. It is a lot for a parent to deal with. And so we might want to get into the now. I just want to do it my way today. I just want to make things work. I just want to get out of the house and things like that. And this is the time where we really need to pause and come back to our boundaries, our values. What exactly are we trying to achieve by or hold on to our values by trying to get ourselves through the door? Right? Is it really necessary that we get through the door at a certain time, is it, a certain place? For example, is it necessary that our child have to do this math today, right? So we really want to question what our values are. If our values are to say that, yes, I want my child to be thriving and learning, but does it have to exist within the four walls or corners of the workbook, right? So we want to be really creative. And it is only when we start to question in this way that we find curiosity within these questions and find creative solutions to solving this problem. I think this is something really, really important.
Yeah, so I'm wanting to make that practical. Okay, so you are unschooling, so maybe you have more time and you're more flexible. I can imagine that some listeners are saying, yeah, well, school starts at 8 and I have to be at work at 8:30, and that means we have to be out the door by 7:30. Now I say I'm going to leave for school at 7:30, no later than 7:30. So you need to be dressed and you need to be ready. Your teeth need to be brushed and you have to have your breakfast, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, 7:25, 7:28, 7:30, but they're not done. Now what?
Yeah, I totally hear you. You know, there are times where you just have to get through the door and you cannot be late. And all of us have obligations. So I totally hear you that it can get very tricky. This is when I introduce my 4-step bridge formula, and this will be the way that we would go about doing that. Like I mentioned about curiosity, there is the other end of curiosity, which is more suitable for children. It's along the same ideas, curiosity, and that is using play as an element to help you move. So I really believe in playfulness, and even as adults, where we turn that playfulness into curiosity, these are all parts of the same block where we will really help the child be able to move on and really keep their resistance at bay, especially when we are working with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, or PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or just basically a resistant child. These are things that we really want to be careful about, that we don't cause more resistance, and really focusing on helping them see that playfulness to doing all of these things, that it is not a chore. There's no need to bring up the defense mechanism of resisting. So this 4-step process or 4-step formula is, the first thing is to have an empathic opening. So you're really meeting the child where they are at and really letting them know that, oh, like you're having so much fun. Oh, you know, you're really feeling really tired today and you really don't want to get out, you know, and just really understanding from their perspective. Like, school's not fun. I know school's not fun. I know you really don't want to go in today because you've got a big test and you're worried about the test. So you want to be really remembering yourself as a small child going to school and how that feels, right? And then giving that validation to the child that's right in front of you. And then the second thing is to, again, be rooted in your value-based boundary. What value are you holding on to that maybe they did reminding of? Like, learning is really important for you. You know, I want you to be a thriving child who knows about things. Or I want you to be a social child where you get to see and hang out with your friends. And so you want to hold on to the value that's important to the both of you. And the third one is where you try to establish why you need to get out of the house in time, and that's where you establish your limits, right? So this is where we will have to go to school, or in 5 minutes time, let's get ready. Let's get out of the house, for example. Okay. And the last step would be a collaborative invitation where you are bringing in that playfulness element that I talked about. So think about how you would be able to bring playfulness in getting them out of the house. Again, it depends on the age range. It could be like, if you have a small preschooler, it could be just, holding on to them and then pretending to be a plane and then zoom them out of the house, and then it becomes a very fun thing. It could be pretending to be a monster. I'm chasing you to help you wear your shoe, and then just creating that element of a chase and fun, so that they don't feel like this is an obligation to wear the shoes, for example. If you have an older child, a teen, it could be having say, hey, we've got this Rubik's Cube, let's bring this toy along, let's bring this game along into the car, into the place that we're going to, and then really using that as a bridge to be able to bring them along. And that's why we call this, I call this as a bridge formula, because you're in this position and they are in that position, and we are trying to build that bridge so that we can get through to them.
I love that. So, number one, lean in empathically. I know you don't want to go to school. I get it. I'm tired too. 2, have what you're asking them to do rooted in values. Why you have this boundary is because you value education or you value whatever it is you're going to do. 3 is to establish the limit, like we're going to leave here in 5 minutes. So get ready, here we go. And then 4 is collaborative sort of playfulness to make it fun instead of drudgery to go and do what you're doing. Did I
Yeah.
get all those? Are those the
Yes,
4?
you got it. Yes, perfectly. And I would say that, it is really important for us to first look within ourselves and to understand that our child is not against us. They are having a difficult time. They're not giving us a difficult time, right? And when we are able to reframe our position and shift from the sense that they are attacking us, they're manipulating us, we are the victims here. And then you go into that softness that will really help them get through. And when you get into the softness, the empathic self, you're really understanding that, hey, this is really hard, and you get into the state where you're there like you would as a friend to help a friend through, except that this friend is your child, right? And I would also add one more thing about how if you have a developmentally complex child or if you have a child who have gone through trauma, this whole 4 steps may not play out in an instant. So we will not be like something that you will go through in one sentence. It could be something that you have to go through in a longer period of time, right? So let not the time be a yardstick of how this plays out, because especially kids who are resistant, right? They need a longer time to hear this message. So it could be hearing this empathic validation the night before, right? It could be hearing the week before, and just really helping them bring it to the forefront of the mind and helping them realize that you're on their side. You're not against them. So some people just need a longer runway to be able to do that. And some children, they know, like most kids know, they know that they are not doing things right. They know that this is what you want them to do. They know that this is what they have to do. This doesn't make that a lot easier, right? And so if you were to say that, yeah, you have to do this, they would immediately step back and say no. Or it can get to a state where they get into this state of overwhelm, like, oh, I don't want to do this. And they will not be able to move out of that state, right? So it depends on your child. You have to, it's this idea of experimentation that you have to go through a trial and error to see what fits your child. And you're really trying to find a strategy that fits your child, that your child can have success with. And sometimes it could mean that you do not state too strongly on the limits, or be able to re-emphasize on, this is our house values, this is what we do. Maybe that's not what they want to hear, but they know that this is what they have to do. It's really sitting by them and realizing this is hard. I know this is hard. Giving a longer runway to the second step instead of just naming it, right? And sometimes that's not what they are willing to hear.
I appreciate that so much. What's interesting, Sheryl, is that it's like you have been through my program, because all the things you're saying are things that I have been teaching folks for a long time and who come into my Love Matters therapeutic parenting program. I'm teaching them very similar things. You have 4 steps to this, and mine would be, I didn't create this, I just used this, which is Dan Hughes's model, which is playful, accepting, curious, and empathic, right? So it's the same stuff without the values. But I think PACE itself is the value, right? To live your life playfully in a stance of acceptance, being curious about what's going on, and then having empathy for whatever you hear, because children are people, right? And we need to respect their peopleness and
Yes.
treat them with the kind of gentleness that we would want to be treated with ourselves. So
Exactly.
I really appreciate hearing your point of view. I love it. We're going to run out of time here, but I realize I would just love to keep talking to you about unschooling. I love the lessons, and I like the simplicity of it, even though I'm pretty sure it's complex when you're doing it. But it's really beautiful. I'm sure your 3 boys are getting the best of you and the best of education and creating curiosity in them that will last a lifetime. So I'm so grateful to have this chance to talk with you and to share it with my listening audience. I'm sure they're very delighted to hear from you. Would you like to take a few minutes to talk about what you are offering in case someone's interested in connecting with you about what
Yeah.
you're sharing.
Yeah, if you're interested in more of my work, they're welcome to stay connected with me. And the best way would be through Instagram. And there's also my newsletter, which I can drop to see. In this course, I have a ChatGPT that I've created based on my 4 steps. And you could just put in some of the things on it, and then you will be able to access it. And so to be able to get this one, all you need to do is to go onto my Instagram, type on any post, this comment on the posts boundary, and it will send you a DM with this access to this ChatGPT prompt that I've created. This is a custom prompt, and it will go through the 4 steps that we've talked about. And so hopefully your audience will find it useful to be able to use that.
Oh, for sure. And for you listeners, all of this will be in the show notes, including how to contact Sheryl in the future if you wanted to get some tips or to do some coaching or anything like that. So she's available. So thank you so much, Sheryl, for joining me here today. And I hope our paths cross in the future, because I would just like to pick your brain a little more about how I can go get unschooled with you.
Awesome. Hope to
Am I
catch
a
up
little
again.
old for that? Do you think I'm a little old to go homeschool?
Nobody. Oh, I think unschooling is a whole journey, right? I don't call it
Yeah.
unschooling, I call it self-directedness. And it's really trying to find the self-directedness within all of ourselves. Constantly, we need to discover about ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So thank you so much again. And I appreciate all you listeners for being here today. And remember, your love matters when more than love is required.